now streaming on Apple TV+.
I'm the accused of murder. Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
A limited series of that from executive producers David E. Kelly and J.J. Abrams.
Were you and Carolina romantically involved?
I lied about the affair, but I didn't kill her.
Your fingerprints were found in her bedroom.
I was in love with her.
So you snapped.
Starring Jake Gyllenhaal, Ruth Negga, and Renata Reinsve.
I betrayed my wife and my children, but I did not kill her.
Presumed Innocent, now streaming only on Apple TV+.
We
are
Cultivate.
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 Cultivate. We are Cultivate.
Hello and welcome to Ye Olde Crime, where we discuss the funny, strange, and obscure crimes of yesteryear. I'm your host, Lindsay Valenti, and with me is my sister and co-host, Maddie Stengel.
Hello.
Hello. Are you ready to hear about what we're going to be discussing this week?
Always.
All right. Thanks to Carrie Ann's amazing research.
Yay, Carrie Ann.
We will be discussing Charles K. Landis.
Okay.
And information was pulled from the following sources: 2023 List Verse article by Craig Wexler, 2020 Murder by Gaslight article by Robert Wilhelm, 2017 New Jersey Advance Media article by Vicky Hyman, 2015 Daily Journal article by Doug Furman, 1988 The Daily Journal, 1876 Evening Journal, 2 editions of the 1876 West Jersey Pioneer, 1875 The Leavenworth Weekly Times, 1875 West Jersey Pioneer, Ann Arbor District Library article, 2 Find a Grave listings, The Press of Atlantic City article by Eileen Bennett, and 3 Wikipedia links.
Nice.
And links to all of these articles will be included in the show notes. Got something you want to say? Shoot us an email over at yeoldecrimepodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your story ideas, see any gifts you send our way, or if you just want to say hello. We're pretty friendly. Speaking of friendly, if you'd like to have real-time conversations with us, consider joining our Discord over at the Cultivate Network. You can chat with us over at the Old Crimers Cubby, or catch up with any of the other great creators that are part of the Cultivate family of podcasts. Just click the link in our show notes or over on our link tree to get started today. Before I dive into the tale, I need to set the stage by introducing our cast of characters and the location of the tragedy.
Okay.
So the key players of this tale are Charles Klein Landis and Uri Carruth.
What names?
Right. So I'm going to start with Charles, who is the main character. Charles Klein Landis was born on March 16th, 1833, in Philadelphia, to parents Michael Grundaker and Mary Louis Quinn Landis.
Okay.
He had one younger sibling, a sister named Matilda Tyson Landis, who was born in 1848.
Nice.
At the age of 19, Charles became a lawyer and started working in real estate.
Wow. That was fast.
Yeah.
You could be a lawyer lickety-split back in the day.
Yeah, apparently he started, schooling for it at the age of 14 or 15. And I was like, hot damn, okay.
Yeah, all right.
After the development of Hamilton, of which Charles had been a partner, he began to dream of starting his own quote-unquote ideal community.
Nothing ever works out when ideal community starts the conversation.
I started thinking of Oneida right away.
I started thinking of, what was the one in South Africa?
Jonestown?
Yeah, Jonestown.
Ugh. According to his Find a Grave listing, Charles had a vision of creating, quote, a city full of factories, stores, schools, churches, and recreation halls surrounded by miles and miles of orchards, farms, and vineyards, end quote.
That would be pretty.
It would. To achieve this vision, He needed to purchase a tract of land that had access to a railroad, but that also had the right climate and resources, as he wanted the community to be a vine country.
Mm.
Charles met with a man named Robert Wood, who owned a large parcel of land that was accessible by the West Jersey Railroad and the newly built Millville and Glassboro Railroad in the South Jersey wilderness. So we're in Jersey. The area was swampy, and people thought that Charles was crazy for his interest in it.
Yeah, I get that.
However, in 1861, Robert agreed to sell him the land, a total of 20,000 acres, or 47 square miles, for $7 an acre. So total, that amount of land, 20,000 acres, would be worth $5 million today.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, adds up fast. $7 now. $7 then is not $7 now.
Yeah. And he sold it to him for no money down, and he wouldn't charge any interest for 3 years.
So he really didn't care. He didn't care about the land at all.
No. And Charles would go on to purchase another 23,000 acres, or 36 square miles, several years later in 1874 near Millville. So he bought more land to expand. At the time that Charles began construction on his city, not many people lived in this swampy area between Forest Grove and Millville. Makes sense.
Yeah, if it's all swamp.
Yeah. There were only a handful of roads in the area, such as Horsebridge Road, Soder's Mill Road, and Malaga Road, which were dirt and not very easy to travel on.
Yeah, so hard for machinery and large stuff to navigate.
Yep. Charles had a 3-point plan for building his ideal community.
Only 3 points? Wow.
1, 2, 3.
Only 3?
First, he had to clear the main roads and then construct a post office.
Okay.
He would then advertise tracts of land to a number of settlers. At the center of the tract of land, he planned 1 square mile would be dedicated to the bulk of the industrial development. So your factories, your homes, your schools, your churches, and your shops, etc., etc.
Okay.
And surrounding this square mile would be where the vineyards and orchards and farms and gardens would be located.
Okay.
So not only this, but Charles had a vision to have all of the primary roads be 100 feet or 30 meters wide and a mile long, which was unheard of. The roads had never been that wide. They were like, what?
Interesting. So he was already forward thinking.
Yes. Construction on what would become Vineland started on August 8th, 1861, when his hired men, who he paid $1 a day, or $36 a day today, drove a stake into a high spot on the railroad in the relative center of the tract of land to begin work on Landis Avenue, which would become the main thoroughfare.
Okay.
And when it came to setting up a post office, the government had to be persuaded to do so.
Oh, I bet. I bet they had to be bribed.
Because his first application was turned down due to the lack of people. And even the Postmaster General said it didn't make sense to build a post office in an area that wasn't even a town yet.
Yeah, it wasn't populated. Because you can't guarantee that it would.
Yes.
You can't just be like, oh yeah, a ton of people are going to come here. Because I bet you they were burned before. Especially during this time when more and more states were actually being incorporated.
Yep. But Charles was adamant. So he spoke with the son of former President John Tyler.
Of course. Of course he has a buddy with the president. Like what?
Yeah. So he and Robert Tyler went to Washington, D.C. so he could plead his case with the Postmaster General in person.
Okay.
And the pair used the argument that although the town of Vineland didn't exist physically yet, it existed in Charles' mind.
Hey, that's all that counts.
Yep.
American dream.
American dream.
Was this before the American dream? Was he the beginner? Was he the first person to ever have an American dream?
Who knows?
He might have been.
Maybe.
Yeah. The first one ever. Nobody else had dreams prior to. Only him.
The creator of dreams. The pioneer of dreams. The ploy worked,
Of
surprisingly.
course. Well, I'm sure they were just like, man, if you have the audacity to get to me this way,
Yeah.
sure.
And to try to sell me this, sure, why not?
Right? They probably just said yes to get rid of him.
Get him the hell out of there.
Yeah, because I mean, if he was that persistent, he wouldn't have stopped.
No. So Charles was able to get a postal permit for the sum of $20 a year, or $713 a year today.
Whoa.
And in addition to being the town's founder, Charles was also appointed as Vineland's first postmaster.
Well, there you go. He gets to
He's just,
cosplay as a postmaster too.
yep.
He's really living those dreams.
Mm-hmm. As the land was being cleared, Charles began to advertise the new city in his own paper, the Vineland Rural, but he also put ads in the neighboring papers of the Boston Journal, the New York Herald, the Public Ledger, and Harper's Weekly.
Interesting. That's a lot of advertising.
Yeah.
He had a stupid amount of money.
Well, he was a lawyer. So,
I know, but like all of this stuff is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like who's giving him this money? Who's blending him these loans and stuff to do it?
I don't know.
It's crazy.
The ads described a city being built just 34 miles outside of Philly by train. He asked those interested in farming to move there and businessmen to invest in setting up new businesses in what would be, quote, an agricultural and fruit-growing colony, end quote. In 1862, the first house was built on East and Landis Avenues, and by 1865, roughly 5,500 people called Vineland home.
Wow. That didn't take long.
Yeah, so 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, direct train service was set up from Vineland to Philadelphia and New York.
Impressive.
Mm-hmm. Charles was known to prefer solitude and enjoyed reading the works of Shakespeare and Dickens, but he also regularly read the Bible, as one does.
I love that he's like, I'm not very social, even though I just bullied so many institutions and stuff, and I'm creating a city that I want to be super bustling and like surrounded by me, but also don't come to my house.
Yeah, don't talk to me.
Yeah. Just like make my dream come true and like fuck off.
Yeah. In 1868, Charles married a woman named Clara Forsyth Meade McGaffey, who had been born on January 6, 1849, in Brooklyn. Clara was the daughter, I'll just call her Clara. Clara was the daughter of U.S. Navy Captain Richard Warsom Meade and Clara Forsyth Meigs Meade. What names?
Like, can you drop one of them, please? Holy smokes.
Yeah.
Why do you need all of those names?
So much.
They took so many names from the old country.
They did.
Too many names from the homeland.
She was born the fifth of 7 children and one of 3 girls. At the time of their marriage, Charles was 35 and Clara was 19.
Of course. And he was like, she's an adult. I was a lawyer by then.
Yep. I was practicing law at that age.
I was practicing law at that age, so who's to say that she's not just like
It's
that?
fine. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Over the years, the couple would have 3 children together: Charles Jr. in 1871, Richard in 1872, and James in 1875.
Charlie, Dick, and Jim.
Mm-hmm. Now, Charles kept a tight leash on who he let purchase parcels of land.
Of course he did, because he's trying to create a utopia.
And even though his vision included vineyards, it wasn't for the production of alcohol.
Ah, yep, his religion.
He wanted Vinland, or Vineland, to be a dry temperance town.
Oh, is he just going to make raisins?
It's all just raisins.
Raisins and grapes. But if you are religious, wouldn't you want to make the blood of Christ?
I don't
You know?
Maybe he liked weevils.
He's like, these guys, you make all of them for him.
Well, Charles's quote-unquote dictatorship of Vinland didn't sit well with Uri Carruth, the editor of the Vineland. I don't know why I keep going back and forth on how to say it. I think it's to protect myself because I don't really know how to say it. The
Okay.
Vineland Independent. So let's
Okay.
talk about Uri.
Okay.
Now, Uri J. Carruth was born on May 16th, 1825, to parents Levi and Lucy Hager Carruth in McDonough, New York.
Okay.
He was one of 3 children and born between his elder brother Carmi and younger sister Lydia.
Carmi.
I know, I thought that was cute. Carmi.
Must be Carmen.
Well, it was Carmi. That's what it said on his tombstone.
Oh,
It's weird.
interesting.
Uri married a woman named Lucy Ann Robinson on January 1st, 1853, when he was 27 and she was as well. Same age.
Wow, that's unheard of at the time.
Never happens.
Yeah, like, was he okay?
And she would have been, what, a spinster at that point?
Mm-hmm.
27. Lucy was born on August 29th, 1825, and according to his Find a Grave listing, the couple had 3 children together. Katie in 1859, Clarence in 1865, and Arthur in 1868.
Did they all survive?
Yes.
Nice.
Now in 1870, Uri purchased the Vineland Independent newspaper at the age of 45, having publishing experience from his time in Wisconsin, where he had lived prior to moving to Vinland. So he was like,
Oh,
I got this.
yeah.
The paper, which had begun publishing just a couple years earlier in 1868, began publishing to tell the truth about Vinland, quote, discouraging careless investment by poor people in the poor lands, end quote.
Well.
Ruh-roh indeed. He was known to be vindictive and combative, but the attacks he published against Charles were meant to humiliate him and his family, particularly his young wife, Clara.
Always fun. Of course, why not pick on the wife?
Clara was known for her, quote, very excitable nature, end quote, and had spent time in an insane asylum.
Oh, so she probably was anxious or bipolar or depressed.
Yep.
Or had feelings.
Or all 3, all 4.
Shame.
Her mental illness was well known in Vinland, and Uri often made it the butt of his jokes in the paper.
Oh, sucks.
Clara would get so upset by the articles that Charles did his best to ensure that no editions of The Independent ever made its way into their home.
Oh, that's awful. Could you imagine having a bully be that, like, prolific in your neighborhood?
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing you can do about it because your husband owns the town.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still not enough.
But it didn't make a difference. Papers would make their way in, and each time she read them, Clara would become dangerously violent for a week or so.
Dangerously violent.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-oh.
What the public didn't know was that Charles was also prone to bouts of depression. The couple were dealt quite the blow in 1869 when they lost their first child, a son, after just a month.
That's not a long time at all.
And it didn't help that many people in town assumed that their marriage was in trouble.
That would cause a lot of stress. I mean, having a child die has ruined relationships before.
And it was their
For
first.
instance. Mhm.
And,
It's hard.
They had quite the age gap between them.
Yeah.
Who's to say?
Right.
Now we're going to move to the event in question.
Uh-oh. Here we go.
On the morning of March 19th, 1875, Charles paid a visit to the office of the Vineland Independent, demanding to see the editor and publisher, Uri.
Okay.
After Uri entered the room, Charles approached him, angrily waving a newspaper clipping in his face.
Of course.
Charles yelled at him, quote, Mr. Carruth, did you write that? End quote. Uri nodded, saying, quote, I did, and I will do it again. End quote.
Ooh. Okay. This is like backstage of Jerry Springer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's not my baby.
Mm-hmm. The article in question, which had been published the day before in the March 18th edition, read as follows.
Uh-oh.
Quote, a prominent Vinelander sat down by the side of his loving wife on the sofa and looked up in her eyes and called her a duck and a birdie and rabbit and all the other endearing names. Then he told her he wanted she should learn the use of a revolver, so that in his absence she could protect their home and silverware and defend the honor of Vineland. Then he went off and bought an elegant 7-shooter and a nice target. Then he
Oh.
set up the target in one end of the parlor and gave her a first lesson shooting. Then he told her he wanted she should practice every day. Then he went away for a week. When he returned, he found the revolver on the other side of the looking glass. The parlor door resembled a bad case of smallpox, and the furniture looked as though it had been indulging in a wrestle with a Burlington County hailstorm.
What is this? Like, what is this?
Yeah, it's like a weird
Weird.
editorial or something.
It's like trying to make a dramatic, like a rom-com kind of a thing. Like it's
Yep.
script writing almost.
Mm-hmm. Did he walk up to his wife and sicken her with the endearing names of all the birds and 4-footed beasts? Not much. He marched out into the street in his shirt sleeves, with but one boot on and that patched over the big toe. Then he went galloping up and down, telling every man he met, confidentially, that his wife was crazy. Then he went off and tried to get her into a private insane asylum. Yes, he did, the wretch. End quote.
Whoa. Them's fighting words. I can see why he showed up.
Yep. And even though they weren't mentioned by name, it was obvious to everyone who Uri had been talking about.
Only because he has been talking about them forever and ever and ever.
Yep. After reading this statement in the paper, Charles had become so upset that he put a pistol to his own head and pulled the trigger.
Whoa.
When it misfired, he had an epiphany. He was trying to shoot the wrong man.
Of course he was. That was the epiphany. God told him to kill the guy Uri instead.
Yep. And it was after that he grabbed his better-built English revolver and went to have a word with Uri.
Whoa.
Quote, "Will you promise not to attack my wife in future?" End quote, Charles asked him.
Mm-hmm.
Uri responded with a simple no.
That was the wrong answer.
Yeah. Drawing his revolver, Charles responded with, quote, "Defend yourself then," end quote.
Oh, snap!
Uri turned, fleeing into the composing room of the newspaper, where Charles chased him before shooting him in the back of the head.
Wow, he's a deadeye. Chasing someone and getting them in the back of the head with a revolver is insane.
Mm-hmm. B. Frank Ladd, who was there at the time of the incident, heard Charles cry out afterwards, quote, "I've killed him. I am sorry. I was obliged to do it. I did it in the case of God and humility. Oh, my poor crazy wife," end quote.
Oh, yeah, I did it, but like, kind of his fault, whatever.
Yep.
I did it for my wife. Bye.
As you can imagine, Charles was arrested on a charge of assault
Murder.
with intent to kill, with bail set for $50,000 or $1.4 billion today.
Wait, did he kill him?
Uri didn't die.
Oh my god.
Doctors would regularly probe his skull in search of the bullet, only to continue to not find it.
That's terrifying.
So, miraculously, Uri was able to recover and live with the bullet still lodged somewhere in his head.
And he had major functioning and stuff? He didn't like...
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Whoa. Alright, God was definitely on Uri's side. That's insane.
Charles was released from jail on bail and immediately set about trying to arrange a financial settlement with Uri so he'd drop the charges.
Of course. He's like, oh, well.
He offered him $5,000, or around $143,000 today, as well as 380 acres, or 1.7 square feet of land, which Uri understandably refused.
Yeah. Like, sorry, dude, not gonna take your money.
You shot me in the head.
Mm-hmm. In the back of the head, like a coward. Although he was running away.
For 4 months, Uri's health continued to improve, but he was out of money.
Uh-oh.
And it was for that reason that he agreed to a settlement of $12,000, or $342,000 today, in cash and securities. All that was required was Charles's signature, but before he could do so, Uri took a turn for the worse and passed away 7 months after he was initially shot on the morning of October 24th, 1875, at the age of 50.
That makes sense. I would assume that the bullet would eventually start degrading and then all the lead and stuff would eat away at his brain.
We're gonna go into it.
Oh no. Oh no.
I know. The October 28, 1875 edition of the West Jersey Pioneer printed the following, quote, "On Sunday morning last, at an early hour, our friend and brother editor, Uri Carruth, late of the Independent, passed from life into the unknown world. Intimately associated with him in times past, we knew him only to love for his genial, whole-souled honor, respect for his warm and earnest friendship, and admire for his talents, culture, and independent qualities. One fault was his, like John Randolph of Roanoke, he was happiest when in the midst of fiery sarcasm."
Did he leave a wife?
And 3 kids, yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
No respecter of persons, his editorial shafts were hurled at friend and foe alike, and yet with it all there existed no enmity on the part of Carruth. His most bitter articles were written when he was in the best humor with himself and the world at large. End quote.
So he was meanest when everything was fine.
Yeah. And the following was printed in the November 5th, 1875 edition of the Michigan Argus and reads in part, quote, "Mr. Uri Carruth, editor of the Vineland Independent, who was shot by Mr. Landis on the 19th of last March and has since carried the bullet in his head, died at 3 o'clock this morning. He has been confined to his bed for some days back. Last evening he ate his supper in a reclining position, feeling to all appearances as he had for some days past. About 3 or 4 hours later he was taken with a convulsion, followed by a violent fit of vomiting. He then sank into a stupor, from which he was relieved by death." End quote.
So he had a seizure and died.
Yep.
Poisoning? Since he ate? Ate food?
No.
Okay.
The following was printed in part in the November 4th, 1875 edition of the Leavenworth Weekly Times. Quote, "The circumstances of the arrest, as ascertained this morning, exhibit new phases of the Vinland War. Uri Carruth died about 3 a.m. Sunday, and by about 8 a.m. a citizen swore out a warrant for the arrest of Landis on a charge of murder. At 9 a.m. Sunday, Constable Babcock found Landis and William Burke, his secretary, near the barn on Landis's property, and explained to them that he had a warrant. Mr. Landis, who had not then heard of Carruth's death, seemed surprised for a moment, and then said, 'Let us go to the house,' but this was overruled." End quote. The trial started January 11th, 1876, at the Cumberland County Courthouse in Bridgeton before Judge Reed. So he was arrested in November, and he stayed in jail until January.
That's a long time, especially for somebody as highfalutin as he was.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big statement.
Charles's counsel put together a 3-pronged defense. He likes 3s.
Yeah, he does. He would have been a really good crypto guy today,
Oh, man. Yeah.
right? So many islands.
So Charles' counsel put together this 3-pronged defense. That Charles was insane when he shot Uri, that Uri's death was not as a result of the bullet, but inadequate medical treatment.
I mean, rooting around in his brain for a bullet probably didn't help him much.
And Uri's provocation of Charles should see the offense reduced to manslaughter.
Yeah.
He fired the first shot by being a bully.
Yeah.
All right. The next part is also from that November 4th edition of the Leavenworth Weekly Times.
Okay.
Quote, "The post-mortem examination commenced at 11 o'clock today at the house of the deceased, about 3/4 of a mile down the railway boulevard. Professor A.C. Thomas, homeopathist of Philadelphia, made the
Oh.
examination.
Oh, just a homeopath?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
But the examination was closely watched by Dr. S. Gross Jr. of Philadelphia, and the following medical gentlemen were also present: Drs. Wiley, Lane, Bidwell, Ingram, and Cook of Vinland, Dr. Henry Elmer and William Elmer of Bridgeton, and Dr. Whitaker of Millville.
That's a lot of people for one examination.
For one, autopsy, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's not all, because District Attorney James R. Hoagland and Colonel W.E. Potter, who would end up becoming counsel for Charles Landis, and a number of friends of the deceased were also crowded into the little room.
Why?
I don't know. But the following was dictated by Professor Thomas as he proceeded. So now we're going to learn about how Uri was doing when he died.
Okay.
Quote, body in good plump condition, fair muscular
Oh.
and an adipose appearance, exterior surface of body showing gravitation of blood beneath skin, no discoloration about head and face, corner of right eye slightly collapsed from absorption of aqueous matter, right eye more plump, point of original wound open and exuding blood's serum, neighborhood of wound much congested, lining of scalp over wound showing considerable clotted blood. Portion of ball was then found about 2 inches below wound, between scalp and bone. It was a flattened strip about 1/2 inch long by 3/4 broad. Original hole in skull partially filled up with fibrous matter.
Yeah.
So he just had this open wound on his head.
Like
Gross.
always? Like just chilling?
Just chilling, I guess,
I
for
wonder if it was
months,
just something that just never recovered after they dug around.
maybe. On separating the skull, it was found of average thickness, pierced by a round, smooth hole at the entrance of bullet, 1 inch to right of occipital protuberance, and 1/2 inch above groove of right lateral sinus.
Holy smokes. So he shot him that close to the eye, like it almost cleared out through his face.
Yeah.
Wow, and they couldn't find it.
Nope.
I wonder if it like fell out his nose or something, at one point, or he like swallowed it on accident.
No, it's in there. They
Oh.
find it in there.
Oh. Mm.
The removal of the upper surface of right hemisphere of brain opened into an abscess, filling up the greater part of the posterior lobe with about 2 ounces of thick greenish-yellow pus.
Okay.
A second abscess was then found at the point of entrance of bullet into brain substance. Smaller and just below the other, a third abscess, lower still, was then found, all being lined by dense pus-forming membrane and entirely isolated from each other. It was just here that Professor Thomas announced that he felt the bullet in the dura mater.
So it hit 3 different spots from the sounds of it.
Or,
There were 3 pieces of infection, 3 sites of infection.
yes, the bullet found immediately after was encysted in the tentorium beneath the posterior lobe, right hemisphere. It bore its original shape of a conical bullet, the cavity being still shown where the charge lodged. The missile was found about 1/2 inch from the point of entry, and a little below it in direction. The remainder of the post mortem disclosed that with the exception of a slight congestion of the kidneys, the body was in a fairly healthy condition. End quote.
So so it was right there. So it was really close, like just below the entry, but it probably infected more spaces when they were rooting around
Mm-hmm.
trying to find it.
Yep.
And so they just created extra wounds in his brain, and then he died from the wounds.
From horrible infections in his brain. Yeah.
Yeah, because your brain can't, there's a reason for the blood-brain barrier. If anything but sugar and oxygen get in there, it dies. It really doesn't want anything else. And same. I only want sugar and oxygen.
So, continuing with this quote, at 2:30 p.m., Coroner Brown commenced the inquest at Union Hall, impaneling 12 jurors who viewed the body. Professor Thomas, who was the first witness, detailed the post-mortem as he had performed it, And in reply to jury questions, he said, "Death was evidently, in my judgment, the result of a gunshot wound, the bullet passing through the brain. The more immediate cause was the abscess following the passage of the ball into the brain."
So the cause of death was the bullet because the disease wouldn't have existed had he not have been shot in the head. That's their argument, is that
Yep.
it's still murder. He still died because of being shot in the head,
Yep.
despite the disease existing after the infection.
At 3:40 p.m., the case was given to the jury, who, after an absence of 18 minutes, returned the following verdict.
Oh, snap! 18 minutes.
So this wasn't like the actual trial yet. This is just the coroner's jury.
Oh, so all of those people were contributing to this decision? Or were they
Mhm.
just looking? Okay, so that's the reason why there were so many people.
So the other people who were assisting and watching, they
Yes.
aren't part of the jury, but they were like noting and observing like the examination,
Okay.
probably to make sure that everything was being like they were checking everything off the list.
Yeah. I'm not super familiar about coroner's trials like this. I wonder if we still do them.
I don't know.
Like this is the first time I've heard of it.
Well, we've had them in the past on the show, but
Yeah.
yeah. So essentially, this this is the pre-trial, if that makes sense.
Okay. So it's the
So this,
pretrial just to confirm that this is the form of death.
hmm
This is what we're charging. This
yes,
is how they died. We all agree.
yep,
This is how we're going to move on with the trial.
yep. This is the physical evidence, and this is what we're going to be using. What we're going to be
Got it.
basing the trial on.
That would make sense that they would have to be really intense about it, though, because I can't
Yep.
imagine back in the day how easy it would be to really try somebody.
Yes.
I mean, unless you're a witch, in which case it's like super easy and you just have to like tell your friend.
So after 18 minutes, return the following verdict: the shooting by C.K. Landis caused the death of Uri Carruth, and they were all agreed and made no addition to the verdict. End quote.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. The February 3rd edition of the West Jersey Pioneer closed their daily report of the trial with the following note. Quote, "The trial of Charles K. Landis for the murder of Uri Carruth, which is now drawing rapidly to a close in our courts, has been a most remarkable one. The lawyers on both sides have done their duty. No man could have been more faithfully defended than has Landis. Messrs. B. H. Brewster, Chancellor Williamson, Jasper H. Nixon, Colonel William Potter, and William A. House have stood nobly by their client, doing for him everything that could be done. On the side of the state, Messrs. Hoagland and Venata deserve great credit. They have defended New Jersey law with credit to themselves, the state, and the people. Presiding judge has acted in every sense impartially, and the trial has been conducted with great fairness in every respect. The thanks of the press are specially due to Judge Reed for the accommodating manner he has always shown toward his representatives." End quote.
You'll never see something like that today.
No.
Wow. Such glowing, unbiased praise all around.
Yeah. The trial lasted 21 days,
Mhm.
and on February 8th, 1876, the jury acquitted Charles of murder based on temporary insanity.
Whoa. I mean, I'm not super surprised considering he owns a town, but
Hmm.
had he been poor, he would have definitely died.
The community was understandably divided on whether justice had been done.
Yeah, I bet it was between classes mostly.
The Daily Journal published the following about the verdict. Quote, "For some time, the jury stood 8 for acquittal and 4 for conviction. There seemed no way to bring all parties together, until at
Hmm.
last a bright idea struck one of the jurymen and he invited the rest to join in prayer.
Oh no.
When they arose, 2 of the 4 went over. Seeing this result, they tried it again, and another juryman was gathered into the fold, leaving one poor fellow alone and unprotected. What could he do?" End quote.
Let go and let God, right? Even for murder trials.
Even though he was acquitted, Charles was never the same after the trial. He was depressed, withdrawn, and at some point he and his wife, Clara, got a divorce.
Yeah, that makes sense. That would have been really hard. And I feel like he probably had a lot of resentment because he did it for her in his mind, whether she wanted him to do it or not.
However, he continued to develop land, purchasing Ludlam Island on the Atlantic Ocean shorefront. He intended to build a city similar to Venice in Italy.
That's ambitious.
The final product didn't exactly turn out like the Canal City, but Sea Isle City, New Jersey, was incorporated on May 22nd, 1882.
I was going to say, is this the establishment of Atlantic City?
No.
Oh, right.
Charles passed away on June 12th, 1900, at the age of 67.
Wow.
And is buried in Siloam Cemetery in Vineland.
They're still in Vineland. There you go.
Yep. Today, Vineland is home to roughly 61,000 people,
Dang.
as well as the oldest local historical society in New Jersey.
Yeah.
The Vineland Historical and Antiquarian Society, which was founded in 1864, has permanent exhibits dedicated to the Civil War, local indigenous peoples, as well as a room dedicated to their founder, Charles K. Landis, which includes many of his personal effects.
I'm impressed that they paid any attention at all to the indigenous people. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is pretty
cool. The
cool.
fact that they even acknowledged them at all that early on is pretty crazy.
Some of its more famous residents include Henry H. Goddard, a psychologist and eugenicist who headed the Vineland Training School for Feeble-Minded Girls and Boys.
Oh!
He also coined the term moron to describe mild forms of mental retardation.
So screw this guy, he started it.
Also John Landis Mason, who invented the mason jar.
Okay, better. Who else?
Yeah.
Mason jars and morons. That's what they're...
Well, it gets better. So Walter H. Seward, who lived to be 111 and was the third oldest verified man living in the United States.
That's insane. Living that long in general is insane, especially during that time. Could you imagine? They would have thought he was made of magic.
No thanks.
I'm impressed when people are in their 110s. Don't you want to die at that point? Are you living well? Are you sure? Okay.
I'm ready to go.
Yeah, as long as you're still happy, I guess.
Then there was Mary Treat, a naturalist and botanist who authored Injurious Insects of the Farm and Field in 1882. She also regularly communicated with Charles Darwin.
Okay. I was just going to say she probably was part of the reason why he respected boll weevils so much and didn't want wine,
And lastly, Thomas Bramwell Welch, who discovered that pasteurization can prevent grapes from fermenting, which allowed him to go on to found Welch's Grape Juice.
Stop. That's crazy so pasteurization was first started for juice?
It was still for milk, but he discovered that he could use that same process to keep grapes from fermenting.
That's crazy.
And that's how he got Welch's Grape Juice. So that's the story of Charles K. Landis, the murder of Uri Carruth, and the founding of Vineland, or Vineland.
And the creation of modern day juice.
Yep.
The invention of modern day juice.
You're welcome.
Yeah, holy smokes, that's crazy.
Looking for more content? You can find us online at yeoldecrimepodcast.com. If you'd like to see pictures from this week's episode, not to mention bonus content and funny memes, make sure to follow us on Twitter at YeOldCrimePod and on Facebook and Instagram at YeOldCrimePodcast. On TikTok? Of course you are. Follow us at YeOldCrimePodcast.
Spooky Spouses, a podcast about ghosts and stuff. Are you interested in the paranormal?
And then all of a sudden we hear this. down a hallway when there's no one else there, I would go, maybe there's a ghost farting around these halls.
Intelligent conversations?
We don't know a lot.
We don't at all, and we never claimed to.
Furbies?
Do these things so you could essentially kiss the Furby, but you're really kissing your ghost partner.
Furbies again a little bit?
I don't know what you want your Furby for,
It's a kiss.
Biting people?
Do you like a food enough to bite middle schoolers for it?
No. Do you?
Mystery boxes?
A box full of human heads was reportedly stolen from a medical supply truck in Denver on Thursday.
Find the Spooky Spouses wherever you get your podcasts. Excuse me.
And this week's podcast plug is the Spooky Spouses podcast. Husband and wife Jordan and Lindsay Reed's podcast is inspired by their love-hate for most things paranormal. Topics include possessions, unsolved mysteries, urban legends, cryptozoology, haunted foods, their creepy neighbor, etc. And new episodes are released every Monday, and we will have a link to their show in the show notes. And they also recently appeared on an episode of Can You Crack the Cramp Word?
Nice.
And we do have a listener question this week. It comes from our friend Dustin from Sandman Stories Presents.
Hi, Dustin.
And he would like to know what case not from Europe or North America sticks in your mind.
The pirate lady.
Shang-Chi?
Mm-hmm. I thought it was Shang-Chi. I just didn't want to be wrong. You know.
You're fine, yeah.
Like, I don't want to botch her name and disrespect her after I was like, I love her.
I love her so much. I can't say her name.
I love that one lady.
Mm-hmm.
But I did anyway, so I guess
it's fine.
The point is moot there. I'd say she's probably my favorite out of that area.
I just thought of it. Prince Sato.
Yeah, I was thinking about him too.
The prince that was locked in the box.
Yep.
I still think about that sometimes. It's messed up.
It's so messed up.
He ended up being a very not cool dude, but it was also as a result of untreated mental illness. So it's like,
yeah,
you feel bad for him, but at the same time, he was not a good dude.
It was just not a good situation all around.
Mm-mm. So Crown Prince Sato. All right. What's something good you'd like to share?
Now, I had a really nice weekend. We had my stepdaughter over, and she's always a delight. She's very sniffly with her allergies being really bad, and I think fresh out of being done with school too. She probably was sick a little bit. So we hung out and baked some things and did some crafts, and it was a good weekend.
Nice.
Had a lot of fun. What about you?
Emily sent me a really nice self-care package the other day.
Nice.
And it's got an insulated coffee mug.
Ooh.
A really pretty card thing with pressed flowers. Some soaps.
Ooh.
And bath bomb and some bath salts. They're all orange themed, which is my favorite color. So
and a solid scent too.
So that was really nice to receive that because I've been a little down lately. So it was nice to get something like that.
Yeah, it's been rough.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad you got that. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Shall we?
Mm-hmm.
A great way to support the show if you want to help out, but you can't do so financially, is to leave us a 5-star rating and review. You can do so on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Good Pods, CastBox, Podcast Addict, and or Audible. If you want a playlist of all our episodes on YouTube, click the link in our show notes or in our link tree and subscribe today for not only a list of our full catalog, but a separate list as well, just of our Can You Crack the Cramp Word segments. When this episode comes out, we are in the midst of a sale at our TeePublic shop.
Nice.
You can get 35% off June 10th through the 20th. So go and get some merch. And also, as a reminder, there are now hats. So you can get hats if you want.
Nice.
You can get hats if you want hats.
That's exciting.
And on that note, as always, I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Madison.
And we'll see you next time with another tale
as Olde's crime.